Hello, Bruins, and welcome to UCLA Alumni Career Engagement's Career Conversation Series. My name is Katie Russo, and I serve as Director of Alumni Career Engagement at UCLA. First, thank you for joining us during this truly unprecedented time. The UCLA Alumni Association is working hard during this time to support you with resources and content. Our session today is the real scoop on small business funding with a number of legal experts and small business owners. We acknowledge the complexities many of you are facing navigating this time as a small business owner, and we're here to share practical tips and resources for you to feel more in control of your situation. I'm very excited to have our UCLA Alumni Association Board President and shareholder at Buchalter, Cheryl Lott, here to moderate our conversation today. Cheryl is a double Bruin, receiving her BA in Political Science and African American Studies in 2001 and her JD in 2004. Before we get started, I wanted to address a few housekeeping items for today's session together. First, we'll have about 20 to 30 minutes of content from our featured speakers, Jaime Nack, Michael Flynn, and Jesse Torres, and then we'll leave plenty of time to answer questions you all may have. Many of you submitted questions when you registered for this webinar, so we'll start with some popular questions from there, but please utilize the Q&A feature, not the chat box, so please utilize the Q&A feature to ask your questions in there, and we will get to as many as we can, time permitting. In a follow-up email, once our webinar ends, our team will share a webinar feedback survey with you all, as well as links to resources referenced in today's webinar. And lastly, this webinar will be recorded for you, so you will have access to this after we're done today, especially for those who may have to leave early. And the link will be shared in the follow-up email so you can access the recording after. Now we'll get started, and I will turn it over to Cheryl to introduce herself and take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the UCLA Alumni Association and our Board of Directors, welcome to this important conversation. Many of our alumni own and operate their own businesses and have found themselves in need of guidance and insight on how to navigate this unusual time. Our Alumni Association strives to bring together Bruins to help and uplift one another. And today's program aims to leverage some of the great experts we have in our network. We're joined today by Michael Flynn, a colleague of mine at Buchalter and a member of the firm's Commercial Finance Practice Group and Mortgage Banking Group, and co-chair of Buchalter's Financial Services Regulatory Group. Jaime Nack, a double Bruin graduating in 1998 and then receiving her Master of Public Policy in 2002. She is the president of Three Squares, Inc., a former appointee to the National Women's Business Council and UCLA Alumni Association board member. Lastly, we're joined by Jesse Torres, a 1998 graduate and principal at ArroyoWest LLC. He previously served as California's state small business advocate and deputy director of small business in the governor's office of business and economic development. Now I'll turn it over to Michael to start us off by giving us some insight on eligibility and forgiveness requirements for federal programs.
Largely on the PPP program, the SBA PPP program, because it appears that the attendees of this program are largely people who fall within the business size that fits that program. So let me start in and briefly discuss that. The SBA PPP program, the Payroll Protection Program, is a program designed to provide loans of up to a maximum of $10 million to smaller businesses with a policy purpose of making sure that employees are kept on the payroll or reinstated into the payroll and that the business can keep operating for that purpose. Let's talk a little bit about what those eligibility requirements are. There are three basic standards for eligibility. The first is a specific standard created in the CARES Act for this program, which is that you have a company that employs 500 or fewer people in the United States. There are two other standards that apply to general SBA lending, but also you could qualify under those standards. One is that you and all your affiliated companies, which I'll discuss in a minute, have a tangible net worth of $15 million or less, and average net profits the last 2 years of $5 million or less. The third way is under general SBA lending, there is a standard the SBA uses called the NAICS industry standard, which lists either number of employees or amount of receipts in one year that a company has to have to qualify as a small business concern under SBA loans. So if you qualify under those standards, you're also eligible. So for instance, if you happen to be in an industry classification that allows for small business concern to have more than 500 employees, you can apply if you fall within that threshold, even if you're above 500 employees. So those are the three ways you become eligible. I should add, though, that a key issue that everyone's facing is what's called affiliation. You have to include in your count for all these standards any company, entity, or individual which you are affiliated. And affiliated occurs if one entity controls another entity through management, one entity owns 50% or more of another entity, one entity effectively controls 50% or more of the other entity by means of its ability as a minority shareholder to control the voting rights of 50% or more of the stock, or by other means controls the voting of 50% or more of the stock. That you are affiliated by management, that is, one entity manages another entity, or one person, say an officer or partner of an entity manages other entities as well. Those are all affiliates. And if you have common interests, such as family members each being partners in a partnership, that would probably be an affiliation. And then finally, if you have certain types of stock agreements that give you the ability to control a company, or you have a pending merger agreement where one company is going to be acquiring another company, that's deemed to be an affiliation. So that, let's say you were looking to see if you had 500 employees or less. If your entity is owned by someone else above you, and they're owned by someone above you, and that company owns another company on the side that it controls, all those companies are affiliated, and you would count all of their U.S. employees to get to 500 employees or less. The same is true for the $15 million and $5 million net worth and profits threshold, and the alternative NAICS employee or receipt thresholds. This is designed to make sure that larger entities that have assets available somewhere else that are connected to each other can get to those assets, and the companies that don't have that, so truly small businesses, are going to get access to these loans because there are limited funds. And once you determine eligibility and affiliation, you have to consider whether there's a waiver of affiliation if you do have affiliation. One waiver is that you've received an SBIC, that is a Small Business Investment Corporation assistance loan. You would then be exempt from having to look at affiliation of anything else you're connected with. Another one would be if you are a franchise that has a franchise identifier number assigned by the SBA. And the third is, if under this special NAICS industry type classification we talked about a second ago regarding receipts or employee numbers, if you are a class 72, which is accommodations like hotels and motels, or restaurants and other food services type companies, if you have 500 or fewer employees in any one location, you qualify. The reason for that rule is specifically because they were very concerned. Hotels, motels, restaurants employ a lot of people in this country. They were very concerned that individual locations that were relatively small, those kind of companies could be overwhelmed by having more than 500 employees in more than one location. So they sorted those companies out specially to say that 500 count is only for any one given location. So let's assume you are eligible and you get a loan. What can you use it for, and how do you get loan forgiveness? Well, those two things are linked. Generally, the allowable uses are for payroll costs, which are defined, include more than just salaries, include some types of health insurance and things like that. Rent on your facilities, or a mortgage payment on your facilities, and utilities, and prior debts you incurred before, I believe it's February 15th, 2020, and the payoff of it, or the payments on a debt if you recently incurred what's called an EIDL loan. That's an emergency loan from SBA. That program was created before the PPP program was created. If you have that loan, you can merge it into your PPP loan, and you can then pay the whole thing off, or you can pay it off as part of your allowable costs. However, to not violate the rules of this program, whatever of those 6 allowable uses you're using, 75% of it has to be for payroll costs. So if you have a lot of rent or you have a lot of mortgage expenses, utility expenses, you still have to make sure you're spending 75% of your total loan proceeds on payroll. And that then leads us to forgiveness. Forgiveness works in a very similar way. You get your loan forgiven if you, on the basis of what you spend in the 8 weeks after you first start dispensing your loan proceeds. And if you have spent all your proceeds properly under the allowable uses, you then look and say, all right, you can get forgiven all of those allowable uses except for the SBIC loan payments and the prior debt. So you can get forgiven payroll costs, you can get forgiven rent, you can get forgiven utilities, and you can get forgiven general prior debt that you incurred prior to February 15th. However, again, for your forgiveness, you separately have to show that 75% of the money that you spent in that 8-week period was for payroll. If it wasn't, nothing's forgivable. So there's two 75% thresholds. One is for everything you're spending, and one is for everything you're seeking forgiveness on. And the goal here, again, is to make sure the money is primarily used for payrolls with a little bit left over to allow companies to keep the doors open a little bit beyond employees, as it were. Those are the basic criteria. At the end of the 8 weeks, you would apply to your bank for forgiveness and have to document these expenses, in particular things like payroll expenses, 1090, or tax information about the payroll. If you use a payroll management or a disbursement company, their records, things like that to prove payroll, and then rent receipts, things like that. You have to prove all this. The bank then looks at it and decides whether you're forgiven. If you're forgiven, you don't have to repay the debt, at least that portion of the debt. If you aren't forgiven, or for portions that aren't forgiven, it's a 2-year loan. Interest and principal are deferred for the first 6 months. It's 1% interest for any parts that aren't forgiven. And banks may choose not to require principal payments during the 18 months from the 6-month period to the end of the 2 years. A lot of banks are not requiring that. Some are, some aren't, but you should talk to your lender about that. And then I did want to point out that the bank is supposed to disperse the funds to you within 10 days of the bank approving your loan. And then you as a borrower are supposed to start dispersing funds within 10 days. And when you first disperse those funds within 10 days, that's when you start counting your 8 weeks for forgiveness and allowable purposes. With that, I'm going to stop there. I could go on forever about these technicalities, but we need to move on to more interesting policy and business issues.
Thanks so much, Michael. I am now going to turn it over to Jaime to share with us her personal experience with the application process and some of the insights she's learned from the process.
Thank you so much, Cheryl, and thank you, Michael. Hi, everyone. First, I wanted to just thank the UCLA Alumni Association, especially Gloria and Katie, who have supported us and created the space for this conversation. We whipped this up in, I think, less than a week, and so it's been incredible to see the response, both from the viewership side and all of the questions submitted ahead of time. So thank you so much for hosting this. A little bit about me. So I run a small business. It's named as 3 Squares, Inc. It's an environmental consulting firm. The business is 12 years old, and we have fewer than 10 employees, and then we have some 1099 or freelance contractors. So we are definitely, I know a lot of the questions that came in were from businesses asking, is this for me? I have fewer than 10 employees. Yes, I am one of those cases. We are based in Santa Monica, so we're an LA County business, but we work globally. So we have clients, all over the US and in different countries as well. How were we impacted by the crisis, by COVID-19? I would say at least 50%, probably more, 70% of our contracts have either been canceled or paused. Why? We work and consult with large-scale events. We also work with companies in industries like automotive or retail, and all of the automotive clients and companies that we're aware of have paused or shut down their factories for the time being because of the crisis. Similarly, the retail companies that we work with have had to shut down their stores. So because of that, a lot of our projects have been either put on pause or canceled. So when I learned about the PPP loan application process, I immediately started to pull my paperwork together. And I first went to my business bank, which is one of the large banks out there, because I was told that the first route to go through is whoever you have your business banking account with. I applied to my business bank account, did not hear back, started to get nervous because it is a first come, first served program. Researched other banks, both big banks, small banks, credit unions, and then I realized that there are SBA lenders who are this unique separate category, and those lenders are uniquely positioned to respond quickly when the SBA issues new loan programs like this. So I applied to a total of around 7 banks and lenders. The only one that responded to me and actually engaged in a conversation with was a local credit union here in Los Angeles. And we had a back and forth correspondence. They agreed that all of my paperwork was in perfect order and they checked off all the boxes. And they said that they would put me in the queue to be reviewed. Well, just because I submitted my paperwork and got everything into the queue, that doesn't mean I'm approved. I waited and waited, thought it was a positive response, and then out of nowhere, I received your loan has been approved by one of the SBA lenders. This is a lender out of San Diego that had never reached out to me before then. They just processed all of my paperwork because I had it in order and put me in their queue and got it approved in time. So I feel extremely lucky that I was able to get my loan approved. It was a frustrating process, yes, and that's part of the reason why I wanted to be part of this webinar and help other small businesses get prepared and get ready themselves for this next round of funding. What documents did I have on my list of 19 files to have ready for the bank to review? I actually created a LinkedIn article and listed resources, including those list of documents. I'm going to actually put them in the chat here and then I'll read through them. But essentially the first document is the Paycheck Protection Program application form. So that's the SBA application. And then a folder with all of your company's documents, right? So your bylaws, your articles of incorporation, your fictitious name statements, the document that shows that you've registered for your federal tax ID, your statement of information that you submitted to the state of your business. Then you'll see a copy of your driver's license if you're the only officer or owner of the business. I'm 100% owner. If you have partners, you would need copies of their driver's licenses as well. Payroll summary report is super helpful. So you absolutely need to be able to calculate your average monthly payroll for the 12-month period. And so I use ADP for payroll processing. They actually created a quick report that everyone could just do a one-click and it would run your average monthly payroll. But if you don't use a payroll processor like ADP, it's something that you can build into an Excel on your own and just create it on your own. Tax returns for the most recent year filed. So that would be 2019 or 2018 if you haven't filed your taxes for 2019. Profit and loss statement or financial statement for last year, so for 2019. Again, that can be something either that you could spin out of like a QuickBooks or Quicken. It can also be something that you just create in Excel. So, a lot of these terms might sound complicated, especially if you don't have a robust accounting system, but they are things that you can build out, with a computer and an Excel system as well. And then your tax statements. So there are different numbers here, IRS 941, IRS 940, and we'll include those in the chat as well. So that's what I prepared to submit to receive my loan. How am I preparing myself now? That is, I think, something that we all can do. Number one is because I was in the queue to receive the loan, I want to prepare myself for loan forgiveness. So I already started an Excel document or database where I'm tracking the payroll spend for the first 8 weeks. And Mike mentioned that once you receive funding, 10 days after, you have to, the clock starts. So that 8-week period is crucial to track really closely. And so you track not only your payroll spend for those employees that were included in that average monthly payroll, but you also want to track how much you're spending on rent, how much you're spending on utilities during that time, and organize that paperwork as much as possible. I'm also keeping track of proof of loss of income, or proof of how this crisis has impacted my business negatively. For me, I work with clients, and I've been able to email, correspond with those clients, and anytime that I get a message saying that this contract or this event has been canceled, I respond back and I say, thank you so much for the notice. We are keeping track of these notices in our files to show loss of income. And I just would like you to confirm that you are canceling our contract for services because the event was canceled or the project was canceled because of COVID-19. And then I just save a copy of that email as a PDF, and it's in a file for me called proof of loss of income. In terms of being prepared for what's to come, I think forecasting what your income might look like for both the rest of the year and then forecasting what 2021 looks like is a really important move for small business owners. And I realize that's super hard. It's hard to predict what next month will look like. But the more that you can start to get a system in place to chart what the future holds, I think the better off you can be. For service businesses, restaurants, cafes, any type of business where your customers are really your clients, to prepare yourself now, I think the best way is to figure out how you can access your customers, right? So I have friends who run restaurants, and they're kicking themselves now because they wish they had a database of all of their customers. If they had that database, they'd be able to easily reach out to them and offer whatever new service to go pick up, packages that they're able to offer. But so what they're doing is they're actually using this time to phone bank and pull data from their credit card processor or otherwise to really build out their customer database. In addition to customers, a list of supporters of your business. I think that's really important. I think we all have had both friends and families and other businesses and partners along the way, vendors who have supported us. So just putting those lists together, because you might need to reach out to them for different support along the way. And in closing, I just wanted to say, Cheryl mentioned I served on a White House council called the National Women's Business Council. And one of the things that was clear serving on that council now is that small business owners are the most flexible, innovative, resilient people on the planet. So we can weather this storm, but I think we will be much better off if we weather it together. And so the more that we can support one another and help out each other, the better. So I just ask that you all think of ways to connecting with other small businesses, supporting them, helping them. Like I said, I posted an article on my LinkedIn, and I'm more than open to take connections. You can read that article there. If you have resources to add, please let me know, and I'd be happy to add them to that article as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your insight, Jaime. Now we'll turn it over to Jessie Torres to share with us some federal, state, and local resources for small businesses.
Thank you. It's great to be on the presentation with all my fellow panelists. Thank you to the UCLA Alumni Association for giving me the opportunity. Again, my name is Jessie Torres. I am a small business owner. I have my own LLC. And so in many ways, I feel like I'm in good company with all of you who are participating today as a guest. We're definitely all in it together. My background, I used to serve as the small business advocate for the state of California. The state has the most small business owners of any other state in the entire country. We have about 4 million. The majority of them are very small, let's say under 10 employees, mostly sole proprietors. And really, coming into this crisis, the only slimmer of advantage that I had is that I had been playing a big part or some part in the disaster response starting in 2018 in regards to the fires. So the Northern California fires, the Southern California fires, all those different fires. So I had an understanding of how at least things would play out, a sense of it. The different federal announcements, when the state would announce certain things. I wasn't baffled by the Economic Injury Disaster Loan acronym, EIDL. So in many ways, I felt a little bit prepared for what was likely to come. Although just like all us here on the presentation, the scope and the size of this pandemic has been just incredible, just unprecedented as far as what we're seeing in regards to the impact of this upon small business owners. But in many ways, I share your pain because I myself, I started my firm last October. Really didn't start paying myself until the start of this year. I personally applied for the EIDL, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, and just like many, was baffled not to get an email response. Wasn't sure if it was approved. Still waiting to see if that's going to get funded. Wasn't quite sure exactly how it all play out, and so it's been frustrating to see how it's all kind of materialized, both from the direction the SBA provided and others, and then to see the reality on the ground. In my current work, I just help my clients now try to navigate through this new kind of COVID-19 reality, try to help them find resources, and then have been making myself available to other business owners who are going through the same thing. And so if you don't quite know where to go or how to access resources, I'm trying to be just that resource as well. I did provide just a quick slide of just the different resources that are currently being put out there. I think a lot of the challenge is just figuring out, like, where the heck do I go? Where the heck do I go to find out how to tap into these resources? Who are the trusted sources? There's so much conflicting information out there, and uncertainty about where to actually link to. That what I want to do is at least provide some of the good sites that I go to from time to time, just to get a handle of, okay, what's currently being made available to small business owners, what is the most reliable information I can find. So and I'll just kind of run through really quickly, kind of from the top. So the first site you see there is the official state of California COVID-19 response page. This is a great site because it's both for individuals and for employers, and it provides links to to both the federal, state resources that are being made available. So you can go from there into things like the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program. You can get connected to the different technical assistance providers that are providing one-on-one assistance to small business owners at no cost. It really is a great kind of just universal landing page, whether you're an individual business or employer. And the other sites there are really a little bit more specific to, I would say, LA County. So you have the Los Angeles Small Business Development Center Network page, which provides you, it's a way to get one-on-one assistance directly. It's a program that's funded by the U.S. Small Business Administration and also the state of California. And if you're looking for just a great person to talk to get one-on-one advice at no cost, that's a great resource. You get connected to a network of advisors. They put on webinars really regularly. It's just a great resource if you're trying to get that one-on-one coaching support right now. And then the rest of them are just, additional websites that would be helpful for those of you who are trying to get a handle, at least what's available here in LA County. So the LA Chamber of Commerce has a great website providing links and different information. They also offer this really interesting program called the 1LA Supplier Matching page, where if you actually produce product, like PPE equipment, they can help match you to folks that are looking to purchase those kinds of products. And so it's a really kind of cool site if you're a manufacturer or a small manufacturer, or just offering different products, to see if there might be potential folks interested in purchasing your product right now. So I highly recommend you check it out. LA County has a really good website, and a little bit different in that if you're looking for information about, for renters or property owners, or if you're concerned about price gouging, this is a great place to go to. They also offer a helpline if you just want some immediate information. And then the last link, just to be a little bit self-serving, this is a website that I created, and all it is just a listing of resources being offered, whether by a federal agency, a state agency, or a nonprofit entity. And really, I did this just for the sake of my own sanity, to try to get a handle of, okay, what exactly is being put out there, what are the deadlines, what is the link to access the resource. I really just try to create an aggregated site where you can just access all the different tools. So that's COVID-19biztools.com. I did in a partnership with just another friend who is also a small business owner. We're paying for it out of our own pocket, but it's just a good place to get some quick and dirty information. I would just say that the other great resource is other small business owners. I can't tell you how valuable it's been to reach out to, friends like Jaime, and others who also have their own small business, who are sole proprietors or or single owner LLCs, just to get a handle of what they're doing and how they're approaching these different applications, because nobody understands better than other small business owners as far as what it's really like on the street. The only other thing I'll mention before we kind of dive into the rest of the conversation is just a bit of advice, to start doing the scenario mapping for yourself. Start thinking about what does reality look like for your business. Think about what the next 6 months might look like. And I know it's really difficult, I know it's really hard, and it's extremely stressful, but the more you can try to get a handle of those different scenarios, the better off you'll be. And I did the same thing myself, looking at financials, thinking about, okay, what if 40% of my clients disappear? What if the way we shop and eat looks really different? Better to do that exercise now than to, 2 months from now, how to do the same thing but not be really prepared. And I know it's difficult, I know it's very trying, but the more you can just try to prepare yourself, the better off you'll be. Maybe I'll stop there and turn it back over for the rest of the presentation.
Thank you so much, Jesse. We're now going to shift a little bit, and we're going to start going to some of the questions that were submitted along with the registrations. Many of you submitted questions. We've culled through those, and we've selected some of the most popular questions. And so if there are additional questions that you'd like to ask, please submit those through the Q&A function on the Zoom. And we will go through those as soon as we finish going through those pre-submitted questions. So our first pre-submitted question is, it seems like there will be additional PPP funds. How can I best prepare? So I'll kick that to any of our panelists who want to jump in and sort of address how to prepare for funds that might become available within the next, hopefully sooner rather than later, but in the next few days or weeks.
Cheryl, this is Mike, and I'd like to point out that we expect the funding to come probably later this week when it gets approved in Washington. As happened the last time, there's going to be a very fast rush to lenders to get in line. Lenders are taking these applications on essentially a first come, first served basis with a caveat. They are, many lenders that we've seen are prioritizing certain types of clients. It might be their smaller clients. It might be their clients that seem to be most at risk. It may be their long-term clients. And just on Friday, in a federal lawsuit in Maryland, a federal judge refused to stop B of A from doing that kind of prioritizing. So we can expect banks will continue to prioritize, which means a couple things. One, get your application in. There's probably not in effect a true application window at some lenders right now because the funds ran out. Send your stuff to your rep or to their application window anyway, so you can be first in line when it reopens. And secondly, talk to your lender and see if they are prioritizing or limiting loan amounts or anything else that might not work for you. You might not be the kind of client that your bank is prioritizing. If that's the case, quickly go find another lender and get in their queue, because we're going to have the same thing happen here we had last week, where the funds go away much faster than we anticipated.
And I'll jump in if I can, Cheryl. So, I would say I don't think a bank would actually tell you if they're prioritizing or not. I don't think that they would give you that information. But what we've seen and what I've seen from personal experience is that the larger banks, it's really hard to get someone on the phone and to get that personal attention. And B, the only person who got back to me, like I said, was a credit union that does business banking as well. And they did not fund me though, because it was too late in the process. So I started down that process. I did not have a banking relationship with the credit union or the other 6 that I applied to. I only have a banking relationship with my business bank, and I do not carry any loans, have not carried any loans with them. So I know that there are some questions in the chat, do you have to have a business bank account? Do you have to have had a loan from a bank? The answer is no. But in that case, I was most successful with an SBA lender, that this is all they do. They do, millions, billions of these loans, and they've been around, I think, for like 50 years or something like that. So I think that for the smaller businesses, I think it might make more sense to look at SBA lenders. And this is what they do. So they tend to have very streamlined systems in terms of how to accept the information from you. Whereas a lot of these bigger banks, had to really snap with it and establish a system for a loan application process that was almost foreign to them. So that would be my recommendation.
I just have one additional thing to add, and this is based off of a comment that Jaime made in her presentation about just one great way to kind of start preparing is by housing all your information to one folder. You know, because I heard Jaime saying that she was tracking everything that essentially could provide evidence to whatever documentation she was going to be providing to a lender. And also, you know, to Mike's point, you know, chances are you're probably going to be applying to other lenders. So just to have all your documentation to one place is really going to be helpful. And then also, as other programs emerge, or even other grant opportunities, or other stakeholders start putting out programs, they're probably all going to be asking for the same kind of documentation. So just having it all one place is going to go a long way for you, just to save you a lot of headache.
Yeah, one other thing to add, oh, sorry, Mike, just because it's not on the list of documents that I mentioned is, and it's kind of crucial, it's a voided check. So in order to get funded, they have to know where to send your money. And this is like the final step in the process. They'll say, we need a copy of a voided check, which is just a business check that you write void on and you scan it. And then they need your bank information and your routing number and account number. And so I typed up a letter and have that information, and I have those two items saved in a folder too. But for example, if you didn't have that and they're waiting, you know, for that last piece before they can confirm you, that just delays the process. So the more that you can have ready to go in that folder with the file names clearly named, like voidedcheck.pdf, you want to kind of simplify the review process on their end.
And Jaime made a great point earlier in her initial part of the presentation when she talked about the need to show the impact of this on you. One of the eligibility criteria I did not mention was you have to show that you've been economically impacted by COVID-19 emergency measures, or that there's great economic uncertainty around your business because of this. And that's not just, you get to say, I'm worried. That's not economic uncertainty. You're going to have to actually show, you know, as Jaime said, some of your clients are not responding to you anymore. People are not reordering inventory from you, things like that, or are telling you they plan to stop ordering inventory after this month because they're going to be out of funds. Anything you can document to show, have it in place, because the lenders will probably want to see it. And if they don't, you need to have a record that you considered that when you applied, to show that you were not, that you were actually following all the requirements and acting in very good faith when you applied for these loans. These are government guaranteed loans. You really do have to be acting in completely good faith when you apply for them.
Thank you so much for that. So in sum, it seems that number one, we know that there's going to be a vast need and a large number of applications. I think history has shown us that. The other thing is that we will need to, those resources that are being allocated to PPP are going to be limited and going to be exhausted relatively quickly. Some of the best sort of practices and tips and tricks that I've heard were from the panel are, one, apply to multiple lenders as Jaime indicated, because you never know who's going to pick it up. You never know who's going to have the most applications, and maybe yours will be closer to the top. Have this list of documents that Jaime set forth, and we're going to share that link later on today with the list of documents that you want to be keeping track of and keeping in that folder clearly identified so that you can submit them quickly. And also keep track of your expenses, not just payroll, rents, and utilities, but also keep track of your losses so that you can have proof of that in the future. So now we're going to move on to our second question, which is, which funding sources are available to me now?
Well, I'll start. I think Jaime spoke on this already quite well. You know, go to your own bank. If you don't have, if you're not the kind of customer that has a great relationship with the bank or a deep relationship, consider going to SBA specialist lenders. They really can process it faster. Those are a great source. But anyone who's qualified to make these loans, and that includes virtually every regulated bank in the country and approved SBA lenders who are not banks, can make the loan. And you just have to find one that if you know someone, go to them. If you don't, as Jaime said, start calling around to SBA lenders who may not be banks. They are going to be very focused on this.
Just to throw it out there, right now there's two major federal programs that are available: the Paycheck Protection Program the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. What you're seeing in the news is that they're looking to appropriate additional dollars for those programs. But as far as like what's currently available, those are available. The state is also offering a disaster loan guarantee program. The county, Los Angeles County, is moving forward on its own relief resources. There's, every day there's a different foundation, a different, nonprofit also offering support. The application deadlines kind of come and go. The best you can do is just, try to scour as much as you can. The links I provided provide a kind of good start, but definitely, just keep an eye on the news because new things are emerging all the time. But definitely the links that are provided can be a good place just to start, handle some of that information.
Yeah, and depending on where you are, so I'm in Los Angeles County and I'm signed up with their Business Resource Center. So I got an email just before the webinar, perfect timing, that LA County is releasing a new grant. It's a micro grant, it's $5,000 for businesses in impacted communities. And it went live at noon today. LA County released an earlier grant, I would say a week ago. So these things are happening almost in real time every day, depending on the type of business you are, whether you're a restaurant, the type of business owner you are. I'm certified as a women-owned business. So there have been a lot of opportunities specifically for women entrepreneurs. And so I would say, sign up to be on those lists so that you're able to access the resources that are most suitable for you. In terms of funding outside of grants and loans, though, I think it is important not to overlook the opportunity that you or your employees or your contractors might have to sign up for unemployment. And I know that the numbers are going up and up every day, but this is a benefit that you or your employees or contractors can also look into as well. And right now there is the addition of the $600 a week for 4 months for those who are on unemployment as well. So there are a lot of different avenues that you can take. Now, if your employees go on unemployment and those were the employees that you use to average your monthly payroll, then you would actually then bring them back if you were to get PPP funded, because that money, in order to be forgiven, has to be going to those employees on payroll.
Great, thank you all so much. Our next question is, what are your tips for those who don't have employees to receive support and assistance?
Just one good place to start. Like I mentioned, there are a number of different technical assistance providers here in the state. So the small business development centers, the women's business centers, the minority business development centers. I know this is just a lot of different names that might be really unfamiliar, but if you go to the state website, they're provided at the top. You can get links to all of those different players. And often the best thing you can do, just as a business owner trying to grapple with all the different information and the flood of resources, is just getting connected to a business advisor, someone that can work with you at no cost, just to help you think through, your financial situation, your strategic plan, your revenue, all those different expenses. Because then you can start to figure out what your game plan is going to be, as imperfect as it might be. But even just getting that help to develop a roadmap so you can understand, okay, here's what I think I might need as far as, cash or a loan. Doing that kind of planning up front is going to be really important. And there's a lot of great free resources that you can tap into to get that one-on-one support. Like I said, if you don't know where to go, the state website is the great place to start. But there is a direct link that I provided to the Los Angeles Small Business Development Center network that can connect you directly. So I would recommend starting there if you just don't know quite how to get started.
Great, thank you so much. Our next question is, how can I best prepare myself and my business to weather this storm?
I'll start. Because I think I was there just like everybody else. I remember at the start of the year, kind of kicking myself that I had the majority of my clients were essentially government or economic development agency, and thinking how I needed to diversify. And then suddenly, I think I'm in a good spot because everybody essentially changed my scope to COVID-19 response, which on one level is great because it keeps my business humming, but on the other hand, it's extremely draining, the stress of it and trying to figure out these different resources. But I would say one key thing you can do is start thinking really strategically about your business. Are there ways you can pivot now? Is there a way to bring in revenue now to support your business, even during this extremely stressful time? And like I said, doing that kind of scenario planning, even though it's very difficult because, the information is scattered and spotty, right? You don't have the complete picture of how everything's going to turn out. But even start thinking about, okay, what does it look like if I'm at 60% of my revenue, or if I need to find a whole new set of clients, or is there a way that I can pivot the work I do to focus on a new kind of clientele? All that planning up front will serve you well as the months kind of go on. There will be a time when we will be allowed to kind of go outside and interact again. And so even thinking now, what does that look like? What does that mean for my business is going to be really important. So for me, a lot of the, my tip is, start thinking about that, start doing that scenario analysis, talk to experts or people that you trust to get good information and start thinking about your business.
Yeah, I would just add that, for me, I always kind of both look ahead and have different decision trees that might come up along the way, right? So there is a decision tree of, will I get PPP funded in the first round, yes or no? And so if the answer was no, that might have impacted what my decision was around retaining my full employees and contractors, or whether I have to either do payroll deductions at a certain point, or have to, if any of the employees have to go on unemployment, that type of thing. So I think mapping out those decisions almost, before you have to make them, allows you to start thinking about that in a calm state. And then when you get to that decision point, you have your decision tree ready, and if X happened, you're going to follow this path. If Y happened, you're going to go that way. But I think it is important to have that, and only best what makes the most sense for your business and what you can do to keep the business alive with the certain number of staffing and resources that you might have. I also know that I saw there's some questions about independent contractors and 1099s, and Mike, maybe you could speak about the CARES Act and what that did in terms of 1099 applying for unemployment.
Yeah, actually, I haven't. I'll be honest with you. I haven't looked at that question. I've been looking at independent contractors in terms of their eligibility for PPP.
Okay.
And independent contractors and sole proprietors are, of course, eligible for PPP, and can show that by means of 1099s and other records. The fact that they employ themselves or actually do independent contracting for someone else doesn't prevent them. And in fact, if you're using independent contractors in your business, you can't count them towards your dollar amounts that you're using. So it does work. I apologize. I haven't been paying attention to the question you just asked.
Okay, my understanding was that what the CARES Act did was it allowed 1099 or the gig economy, if you will, or freelancers to then for the first time be eligible for unemployment. So they're now included in that pool that can both apply for unemployment. If you max out unemployment, that's $450 a week plus the extra $600 for the next 4 months. So that is a big resource that is available both to you if you yourself are a 1099er, or if you have 1099ers as part of your team.
Yep. In regard to Cheryl, in regard to your question about what people can be thinking about strategically, one thing I would say is also keep your eye on these current federal and state programs we're talking about. If the economic situation continues to not unlock itself quickly, there's a very strong chance many of these programs are going to not only get time extensions, but dollar extensions. There'll be more funding put into them. There's really no choice in the long term for that. So I would say keep an eye on those and see if there's an ability to up the amount you're getting or to ask for more. And also keep in mind that just because you're getting aid from one of these programs doesn't mean you can't apply for another, as long as you're not double dipping on exactly the same expenses. If you're getting your payroll covered by PPP, you probably can't go into some of the other programs to get payroll covered, but you can probably go into them to get other things taken care of. So as you get down the road and you're having problems, keep that in mind as well. A lot of these doors are going to be open in various creative ways going forward.
Great, thank you so much. And one of the things that I want to just touch back on in this scenario with in relation to this question is something that Jaime said earlier about small businesses being extremely innovative and extremely nimble, and we're seeing that play out in real life with some industries, with them shifting their business model. And that goes to something that Jesse was saying a few minutes ago. You're seeing restaurants shift to being grocers, basically, and providing the same sources of produce and meals that they're sourcing them from their same suppliers and now turning around and selling those to the public and being pickup grocers. And it's that sort of innovation that will help you weather the storm in the short term, along with the long-term planning that Jesse was talking about, and along with the long-term preparation that Jaime and Mike were talking about in regards to making sure you're keeping track of things so that you can submit for forgiveness in the future, so you can track your losses and see if maybe you even have some insurance coverage for some of these things. So on to our next question. What are other practical tips to help get people through the process of applying for PPP or other available aid?
Well, the first thing I would say is talk to the lender you're applying to and find out what they think they want from you. It may not correlate exactly to the requirements of the program. We've seen lots of instances where certain banks are asking for more information than the program says they have to take, or are asking for it in slightly different ways. You don't want to get slowed down for a day or two having to revise what you're submitting because it turns out they want it a little differently. So it's very important, don't just go in, read the rules on these programs and make your submissions. Talk to the lender you're submitting to and make sure what you're submitting lines up exactly with what they want. It'll save you a lot of time.
Yeah, I would just say from a practical tip, so I use Dropbox. Some people use box.com, but any type of online cloud storage file server, so that then you can basically create a folder, and I call my folder, PPP loan, and then within each folder I have IRS documents, business documents, payroll, and so it's organized in a way where I can just share the link to that shared folder to any of these lenders if they have a file sharing service, and access my whole package essentially and review it quickly. So that saves them time. The more that you can do to make their job easier to process you, the quicker you'll get approved. And in my case, I got processed by someone who never reached out to me. And I know Michael just said, to reach out to your lender. The frustrating thing is every lender that I reached out to, including my business bank, would not respond to me, and I'm sure that's a similar experience for many on the call as we're seeing in the Q&A. And so I think that don't get frustrated. Just say, okay, what can I do to make their job easier? These people are overwhelmed. All that I heard was that everyone's working day and night through the weekends. I would get some emails, notifications back that I had documents to sign over the weekend from the lender. So, these people are working really hard and they're overwhelmed. So the more that you can streamline it, the better.
Yeah, I would just concur with that. Talking to impacted small business owners, impacted lenders, everybody's at maximum stress right now. So patience is key. Although I know it's very difficult. And yeah, definitely for all those single owner LLC and sole proprietors, I definitely feel your pain, because it sure did feel like we weren't really included in a lot of the early kind of recommendations and regulations of these different programs. And now you're starting to see a lot more clarification around that. So you're going to start seeing, as these programs have been launched, now that kind of more description and analysis and direction as far as how do you actually leverage these programs, what are the fine print around everything. And, to Mike's point, it's one thing for SBA or a federal agency to say, here's the program, but a lot of the interpretation and the actual, facilitation falls upon the individual lender or the individual agent. So there's a lot of kind of, everybody's doing a little bit differently, which is also causing a lot of misinformation and kind of confusion. So keeping in touch with your lender, making sure you know who your relationship manager is at your bank, making sure you're keeping tabs on them, because to Jamie's point, they're overwhelmed. So you will have to be proactive in reaching out and asking for information. That's the most important thing to do, is just be proactive for your own business.
Thank you all for that. And, so it goes back to some of the points that we talked about earlier: applying to multiple lenders, having your stuff organized, easily accessible, making the process easy on the lender who, as Jaime pointed out, is overwhelmed as well. And I would suggest that you also try and track the information that you've provided to each lender, so that if they can't find something or what have you, you can go back to your own files and easily find it and resend it. So we'll move on to our next question, which is, how do we coordinate the support programs offered by different government agencies? Expanded family and medical leave program for employees with children at home, EDD work share, and our own vacation and sick leave policies.
I'll take a stab at that. It kind of sounds like, how do I figure out, what makes sense for me? And so I think this, one is even potentially, how you could start to approach it is, developing a grid of the opportunities you want to pursue. I did this for certain clients. Is I looked at the different programs that are out there, and I looked at the eligibility, and then I made that kind of analysis of, okay, what can we reasonably apply for? What pertains to me? And then, like I said, nothing beats having that one-on-one conversation with a small business expert. So connecting with a technical assistance provider, sitting down with them and just saying, hey, here's what I think is applicable to me. Here's how I'd like to move forward. What do you think? What's your recommendation? That could go a long way. But I think, although I know it's challenging because there's so much out there, but even developing that kind of grid for yourself of saying, okay, here's programs I know are available. Here's what the eligibility criteria is, and here's what I think I can reasonably apply for. And then doing the work of talking to those individual entities, seeing if you could apply, how that works, and just doing that kind of homework. So that's just the initial take from mine.
I would agree with that. I think that's a great idea to create that kind of matrix chart. And part of it is, of course, is to make sure that for each of the programs it might be a benefit to you, are there restrictions on the ability to use proceeds or benefits from other programs? Because this is not just a check the box kind of approach. You have to look at things in totality and say, if I go towards this program, it'll help me here, but it may restrict me in terms of certain employee benefits and things like that. So I think Jesse's idea of a matrix that lay this out and sort of look at it from that perspective is really a great idea.
Can I just add in that there's going to be a lot of kind of fraud out there and people trying to take advantage of you. So let me just say, be very careful, as far as the resources you tap into. Make sure that if it's a website, that it's a legitimate website that is being provided by the state or the federal agency. Just be careful as you go about it, because obviously, people try to take advantage of business owners during dark times. So just be very mindful. If it doesn't feel right, it probably isn't right. So don't ever hesitate to reach out to the particular agency to ask questions, or your lender. Just be wary of that kind of stuff.
And in that regard, I'd say pay careful attention if people are saying you're going to have to pay fees to get a loan from them or get other benefits from them. For instance, a smaller SBA lender who may have just recently gotten approved for these particular programs. We've seen instances where people are, for instance, under the PPP program, banks can't charge borrowers fees for that program, but some people have been. If you find someone like that, two things you want to do: get away from them fast and report them to the proper people, the Better Business Bureau, the SBA, people like that. We don't want those kind of people out there creating problems for all the small businesses in the country.
Thank you all so much. So we're going to go to our final question because we're running up on time. And our final question is, once PPP funds are received, how soon must we reactivate employees who have been furloughed or had hours reduced?
Okay, well, I'll go first, and Jaime can jump in if she has some thoughts. I believe the idea is that you have to rehire them all within the 8-week period of the loan. And if you do, then you can move on to loan forgiveness. And if you don't, of course, then you're going to have problems with meeting your 75% criteria. It's a little confusing how you figure out the 75% payroll mandatory requirement if you only retire them at the end of the 8 weeks. And I would have to go through and sort that out. But in general, you can move to rehire them within the 8 weeks, which means you've got to move fast because the process of rehiring and reinstating them takes some time.
Yeah, so that's the tricky part is for me, I had my employees, I kept my employee, I still have all of my employees. I'll get funded, and then I'm tracking and proving the fact that I'm keeping them for the 8 weeks after I receive funding. But I have friends who are in different positions, like they've had to close their store or their restaurant, and so they've told all of their employees to go on unemployment so that they could get, paid right away. And they can't open their store or restaurant because of government orders. So if they get approved and get funded, in order to be able to forgive that loan, they have to have on the books the same number of employees that they used to apply for the loan. So let's say they had 20 employees when they were open last year, then they need to have, it doesn't have to be the same people, right? But it has to be 20 people if they want to max out using those funds and then apply for forgiveness. Now, if they, instead of hiring 20 back, they hire 75% instead of hiring 20 back, they hire 10 people back, let's say, then they will not get full forgiveness of the loan because they won't be able to use that money to meet the payroll, the 75% payroll.
Thank you all so much. So I think we're at time. We're a little bit over, but that's okay, because I think all of these questions were really important and the answers were very informative. I want to thank all of our panelists for joining us today for this in-depth conversation around small business funding. And I'd really like to ask the panelists how Bruins can best connect with them after this webinar.
So for me, either social media or LinkedIn. My first name's a little different, Jaime and then Nack, but feel free to connect with me social media or LinkedIn.
And for me, it's just to email my work address at Buchalter, which is mflynn, MFLYNN at Buchalter, BUCHALTER.com. Or you can just go to the Buchalter website and look me up on the attorney link at the Buchalter website.
And I just provided my email address for everyone if you'd like to email me, or you can reach me on LinkedIn. And I also post pretty frequently about different resources on LinkedIn and on Facebook and Twitter. So, social media goes a long way.
So I also want to really thank Team Alumni, specifically Gloria, Katie, Joseph, and Julie for all of their work in bringing this impactful program to our alumni and the other programs that they're working on now to really help us all through this time. Today's webinar is recorded, and we will be sharing the recording and any of the resources we talked about today. So Bruins, we're in it together, and if you want to connect with other Bruins, we encourage you to sign up for your profile on UCLA One to start today. You can promote your business and services, post and find jobs, and introduce yourselves to like-minded people. The UCLA network is a powerful one, so don't hesitate to activate it today. On behalf of all of us here, thank you for your time, and go Bruins.